there has to be some communication between white and blacks. I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting
so they
to force.
so they can communicate. You're okay with that, but you don't think they should be going to dinner together and playing golf together and dating each other?
Generally not, sir. And I think it's been detrimental to Western civilization.
The guy that I'm introducing now on the line, well, you could call him controversial because he is a former Ku Klux Klan member and he's running for mayor in Biloxi, Mississippi. He contacted me through email and I said, all right, we'll have you on the show. Let's talk about your candidacy. He's running as a Republican and his name is Jordan Golub, who joins us right now on the program. Jordan, I do appreciate you being here, sir. How are you?
I enjoy listening to your program on YouTube, sir. I don't always agree with you, but I think you're pretty fair with your comments. You have a lot of ignorant people call in at times, sometimes not, but I enjoy listening to it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Jordan. Thank you. If somebody described you as a controversial figure, how would you respond to that?
Well, you know, I'm not looking to make any new friends at this point in my life. I mean, in a few months, I'll turn 67. You know, I've had a lot of controversy in my life with my parents, who are now both deceased, because they were Jewish and they weren't too accepting of the beliefs of the Ku Klux Klan. And, you know, I've people some people support what I say, some people don't. But
Fair enough.
If you want to get involved in politics, you gotta, you know, like Harry Truman said, if whatever it gets too hot, you got to get out of the kitchen. So,
but help me understand this. You're
yes,
born
sir.
you're born Jewish. You're a Jewish man. You come from Jewish parents. Why be?
Yes, sir.
Help me understand. Why be a member of the Ku Klux Klan for decades? A group that hates people like you. They hate people that are Jewish. It's a known hate group. You know that, against minorities and people of the Jewish faith. Why would you get involved with an organization that literally hates people like you that are born Jewish?
Well, I wouldn't say, when the pressure came and when I was kicked out of one of the larger Klan groups out of North Carolina because some Nazis were pressuring that particular Klan leader to get rid of me, I wouldn't say that all the Klan, even that leader, kind of later apologized to me for what he had to do, but for political reasons, he had to do what he had to do at the time. I have my reasons why I got involved with the Klan. I've been involved with the Klan since I was 18 years old. I mean, I'm not a current member of any Klan group. I'm not a so-called neo-Nazi. I think most of the so-called neo-Nazis out there today are frauds, although I think some of them have some good ideas. Most of the ones that are that the media calls Nazis are not, in my opinion, Nazis. People like, the very anti-Jewish and very wealthy and very crazy rap artist Kanye West. Now, I know there might be people on the radical right who like his anti-Israel views, and I might agree with some of those views.
Well, it's not really It's not really anti-Israel views. It's more of anti-Jewish. I mean, he sells swastikas. I mean, the guy is a Jew hater. Let's just call him for what he is. But
so is Candace Owens.
I agree with you 100%.
Sir.
But I believe a lot of Klan members have very similar views that a Kanye West has, and that's why I asked you that question.
Certainly the left-wing Jews are not going to be wearing swastikas because they don't want to be associated with anything to do with National Socialist Germany. But the fact is that most of the protests on the campus, like Columbia and whatnot, as you well know, sir, are backed. The so-called pro-Palestinian protests have been heavily financed by, a lot of radical left-wing Jews, including, the Hungarian George Soros.
Well, I think there's a difference between being pro-Palestinian and just being anti-Jewish. Yeah, I think there's a fine line difference there.
What I resent about Mr. West or Mrs. Owens or whatever her name is, first of all, I don't agree with her interracial marriage. I think it's against the spirit of the Seventh Commandment.
All right, hold on. Let's talk about that. That was one of the issues that actually, Jordan, I wanted to talk to you. Why do you care if a black person dates or marries a white person? Why does it bother you to have two human beings that might be from different backgrounds and different skin color.
Doesn't, you know, it's not it's a matter to me, sir. I mean, you know, well, it's a long story, sir, but you know, I believe a lot in the opinions of people like Sheldon Emery, the late Sheldon Emery, the late Bertrand Lewis Comparet.
No, I get that, but I'm asking you. I get what you're saying, but
Yes,
I'm
sir.
asking you, Jordan, because you're the one who's running for mayor. Why does
Yes,
it bother you when, if you want to
I think it's a violation of God, like many of the founders of Christian identity. I believe it is a violation of the seventh commandment and the laws of God. And I mean, in Numbers 25 in the Old Testament, we have the story of the Phineas priesthood.
Okay, but my God that I believe in, wants you to be happy and wants you to be who you want to be with and be happy. And what you claim your God tells you might be very different than what my God tells me. And my point is, how does that affect you negatively? Forget about what you think God might be telling you. Why does it bother you to have a black man and a white woman that love each other, that care about each other, having a family and getting married or even dating? How does that affect you in a negative way? I guess that's my question.
Doesn't affect me personally. It does affect the state of the nation, and it affects Western Christian style civilization.
How does it affect it? How does it affect civilization in a negative way when you have a hardworking?
Well, you've heard of Matthew Arnold, the famous English poet who wrote Dover Beach. You're familiar with him?
Yeah,
right,
but
sir?
yeah,
I'm
but
sure you had him.
Yeah, I am, but I'm still confused how that answers my question, because you said it doesn't
negatively. I'm going to read you a small quote that I just wrote this down.
But I don't want to.
Over a year ago.
But Jordan, I don't want to hear what somebody else. You're the one running for mayor, right? I understand.
Yeah, well, this expresses pretty much my belief, much better, because he was, much better in the English language than I'll ever be. Even though I
get that, but sir, with respect, you're the one who's running for mayor, right, Jordan?
Right. So let me read you his 2 sentences he wrote. If you know that. The mixture of persons of different race in the same commonwealth, unless one race had a complete ascendancy, tended to confuse all the relations of human life and all men's notions of right and wrong. That's from Matthew Arnold, born December 24, 1822, died 1888.
Okay, so you're reading a quote from somebody in the 1800s. We live in 2025. As you know, we had something called slavery. You can't own human beings anymore. That's why I'm asking you now. Okay, now, Jordan, in 2025, you claim that
I've always opposed. I've never been a fan of slavery.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad that we agree on that. But
I admire the Confederacy, but I don't believe the Confederacy's main goal was to preserve slavery, because over 94% of the Confederate soldiers, whether they were in the Army of Northern Virginia or the Army of Trans,
we agree on that. We agree on that. I'm just confused why you don't think different races should be together and marry, or I don't understand that at all.
I think it's against God's law, like I said.
But that's your opinion. So you can marry white people and only date white women, but why tell other people what to do?
I'm not telling you. Up until Loving versus Virginia, the 1967 Supreme Court decision, miscegenation was against the law. In most states.
Okay, but it's not against the law. But we can speak to that. But I'm talking about right now. It's not against the law for interracial couples. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I disagree with you. Why do you want to change and rename Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard downtown? You've called Dr. Martin Luther.
Several reasons. First of all, he was a plagiarist. He was a grifter. He plagiarized most of his doctoral thesis at Boston University in 1955. I'll tell you the main reason I'd like to get it. First of all, he's not from Mississippi.
Who cares?
Second, he supported Viet Cong victory. He supported Viet Cong victory in the war. I mean, you can research it, sir. You can Google the information.
Okay, let's just say hypothetically what you're saying is true. He still changed the course of history. And that was a time where black people couldn't use the same fountains as white people. They were in the back of buses. He changed the course of history. And his I Have a Dream speech is one of the more popular and most famous speeches of all time. You would have to agree with me that he did change the course of history for good for minorities in this country.
He changed the course of history.
Then why did you call him no good?
For good?
Then why were you?
Because integration is not the answer to bad race relations or whatever.
You don't think
it was an issue as far as during the days of segregation? I will say many of the in the blacks in the southern states, many of the black schools when they were segregated, there was certainly most of the white conservative politicians back then, the South was
So
solid
you think we should be
Democrat,
segregated,
Democrat.
Jordan? You think that we
What was
should be,
that?
you think that we should be segregated right now?
I think that civilization in Mississippi, for example, was much better off when things were segregated. Now, I agree that there was not equal funding of black schools during the days of segregation, you know, before, before the Holmes v. Alexander decision, which was like the final last. I mean, we had Plessy v. Ferguson in 56, which overturned.
So you don't think that black people and white people should be hanging out with one another? They shouldn't be using the same.
I don't know about hanging out. I mean, in a state like Mississippi or the states of the Deep South, there's so many blacks. There's always been, even during the days of segregation, there has to be some communication between white and blacks. I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting
so they can
force.
So they can communicate. You're okay with that, but you don't think they should be going to dinner together and playing golf together and dating each other?
Generally not, sir. And I think it's been detrimental to Western civilization and going back to the foundation of our nation.
How is it
going back to the very foundation of our nation? Some of the biggest abolitionists who weren't even from the South, people like John Jay, the Federalist. He was a supporter of the American Colonization Society. Like so many of the people like James Madison, James Monroe, they were so many of our founding fathers, some of the people from the early republic were members of the American Colonization Society. They felt like Jefferson that blacks should be eventually emancipated, but they could not live together. And
so hold on, hold on a second. Let's backtrack. If you win and you're the mayor in your county there in Mississippi, you don't want to work with black people. Is that a fair characterization?
No, I have to work. There's one councilman here in the city of Biloxi. I would have to work with him.
You would have to. I understand. But you just said you would have to. Is that something that you would want to do, or you don't want to work?
I don't know about as much as Marjorie Taylor Greene likes working with some of the
Marjorie Taylor Greene is a bigot and she's a terrible human being. I'm asking you specifically. I know you would have to work with somebody black.
Yeah, as long as they treat me with respect, I'm not going to. In fact, I'm not going to engage in some of the stuff that the left-wing Democrats and the right-wing Republicans do.
But why not treat everybody? But why not treat everybody the way they treat you? Why does it bother you so?
I'm all for that, sir.
But you just said you're for
forced integration.
You just said
I used to live in a poor section of Jackson, Mississippi. That's a city that's like 83% black now, and right now the mayor and the Hinds County District Attorney are both under indictment for bribery charges. Understand, innocent until proven guilty.
I understand that.
Mayor,
I get,
yes, sir. Going back to Jackson, it's now 83% black. It is not safe for white people in most of the areas of Jackson, Mississippi.
It's not safe because they're. Well, help me understand.
People that are there.
Hold on. It's not safe because they're black. Do you think it would have been safe for black people?
No, nothing to do with because of the black. I'm saying it's not safe because of the integration and the blacks taking over the institutions. When there was segregation, you could walk down the streets of South Jackson.
Would you characterize white people taking over on January 6th? There weren't black people that were arrested that day. They were all white people. And
I'm not a big fan of the so-called insurrection or even the theory that Trump absolutely had the election stolen. I'm not a big fan of that theory. I'm not a big Steve Bannon. I don't drink the Steve Bannon Kool-Aid.